Greetings, our dear children. We reached the point in our history when Yeshua and Mary Magdalene finally set foot on the path of their service, for which their souls incarnated on earth, this time with the masculine and feminine principles at the same time. The fact that in Agartha they only accepted the male half did not mean that the knowledge and experience received by Yeshua did not extend to the female half. This is exactly what happened when Yeshua finally reached the family home and embraced his beloved Mary, his own part, and his son who had grown so much. What happened next was like magic. Yeshua's energy field, apparently, was absorbing into itself all the subtle bodies of his beloved, transforming them into vibrant radiant light bodies, and filling them with the energies of the higher vibrations. It immediately reverberated in Maria's physical body. Her face, eyes and appearance acquired a radiant celestial luminosity, with an inexplicable radiance and softness. She became the embodiment of love and goodness. She was femininity in all its beauty and depth. For her, the return of Yeshua was not only the reunion with her beloved husband, but the beginning of her new life still unexplored, in her new capacity as man-god. Yeshua shared with her everything that happened with him in Agartha. He told her about his trip to his home planet and the wonderful welcome he received from his star family. He led her by the hand along the route of the fairy tales that he had just completed himself. She enthusiastically absorbed all her sensations and impressions of the energies of these places. He absorbed the vibrations of the ancient civilizations that once lived on Earth and the energy of his star family. He felt his entire consciousness, his body and his entire being change. She understood that this process was irreversible, and that she too was forever entering this wonderful and hitherto unknown world. He understood that he would live there and that he would lead the people of Earth to this light and this love, which now filled her, and it would be the purpose of his life with Yeshua. She gladly accepted his service. She knew that nothing and no one could force them to deviate from this path that their soul had chosen before reaching Earth. She accepted with love and gratitude the weight of this great responsibility that fell on her shoulders. Both were fully aware of the danger they could run in Jerusalem, where they had to return, and where the power of money and cruel laws reigned that suppressed the will of man. The consciousness of the people was not willing to accept divine knowledge, and great and arduous work awaited them that would consume all their energy and time. They made a very difficult decision. They left their beloved son in the care of their benefactors, because they had a long way to go and their future was completely uncertain. Here in this blessed house, where he was loved as his own son, the child would be safe, well fed and clothed. What was even more important, the spirit of Buddhism that reigned in this house was very close to them. They would be happy if their child could absorb this purity and this love for all sentient beings, which was the very essence of this ancient Indian religion. However, the separation was not easy for them, but the peace and safety of their son surpassed their parental love. After saying goodbye to their benefactors and kissing their beloved child, they set out in search of the caravan that would take them as soon as possible to Jerusalem. The Second Coming of Christ. Part 20. The New Reality. So, Yeshua and Maria set out on their return journey. All the time they felt that they were not alone, that the higher powers were with them, taking them by the hand and fixing everything in a wonderful way for them. They quickly found a caravan, with which they crossed all of India and headed towards the Jewish lands. The journey lasted for several months. During this time, they were able to develop the skills given by the citizens of Agartha and anchored them even more in themselves. They learned to live in the third dimension, which now seemed to them like a theater setting in which dramas and comedies were performed, where people displayed their lowest and highest qualities, and where the eternal struggle between good was fought and evil. Yeshua and Mary could see everything in their non-hidden form, as if they were reading the thoughts and emotions of people, searching the most hidden corners of their souls. This happened unintentionally, not because they wanted to, but because people's souls were becoming transparent to them. But the most surprising thing was that even the lowest human emotions and the most devious acts did not provoke indignation, condemnation or aggression on their part. They were able to see the causes of these acts, penetrate the very essence of this endless game in the scenarios of the three-dimensional world, where each soul has its own task, its own role and its own line of work that they had chosen, and like theirs had chosen before coming to Earth. Yeshua and Mary sent their unconditional and unlimited love to every person they met, whether good or bad, rich or poor, sick or healthy, generous or greedy. They realized that they had passed to wear the clothing of the dual world, after living in another space, where there was no division between people and therefore no evaluation or judgment of people and their actions. They needed to get used to these new feelings and sensations, to learn to live in such a way that they would integrate naturally and harmoniously into this double life that was already alien to them. This long journey was very useful for them, because it allowed them to get used, slowly and quietly, to this new reality. It also allowed them to develop the inner habit of hiding the fact that they saw through people, because others were not prepared for this. They could not allow themselves to break the rules of the game, to rewrite the history that these souls had chosen. They could not invade the emotional and mental spaces of strangers. They could only be benevolent outside observers and bystanders. On the other hand, they also had to prepare their own stage for the divine game by which they came to Earth. They descended from the heights of the 8th dimension to this 3-dimensional world, to help humanity to ascend at least to the next higher level. They decided to start constantly filling the space around them with divine light and love, and then to observe how people reacted. Many unexpected surprises awaited them, both disappointing and pleasant. The actions of the people caught in the divine currents were sometimes unpredictable, as they could neither understand nor explain the impulses of their souls. It was similar to the way people dive into the water, where some go to the bottom like a rock and others float to the surface and sway on the waves, spreading their arms joyfully. This is how Yeshua and Mary gradually learned their first lessons on earth, in their new capacity as men-God. The Second Coming of Christ, Part 21, A Precious Experience. We continue our story about the life of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene in the new reality, which was a novelty for them. Very few people could notice, much less realize, the unusual couple that was next to them, because Yeshua and Mary Magdalene did not seem to be different from the others, except, perhaps, for their very benevolent and rare kindness. They were young, happy and resourceful, and people were unknowingly attracted to them, wanted to charge with their living energy, or simply wanted to enjoy socializing with this lovely couple. The caravan was made up of 30 or more very different people. They were wealthy merchants, camel drivers and ordinary travelers, who were afraid to go alone on such a distant journey. It was a special cross-section of society and people of all ages and classes. Mary and Yeshua watched with interest how they reacted to the divine energies with which they filled the space around them. It seemed that the higher powers created ideal conditions for their beloved children. All his travel companions were constantly before his eyes, and while they were trapped in the energy field of the high vibrations, Yeshua and Mary could calmly and slowly observe the behavior of the people of the 3-dimensional world. The first thing they noticed was the great endurance and resistance of all the participants in this long journey to the difficult conditions of the road, and it was not only a characteristic of people, but also of animals. None of them became ill, and what was especially nice is that none of them experienced physical overload, despite the fact that their daily walks were incomparably longer than those they did on the way to India. They also noted that the atmosphere in the caravan was surprisingly peaceful and caring. If any small discussion or friction arose, Yeshua would send these people, from his heart chakra, an additional flow of energy, and the conflict that was looming there even dissolved before starting. But the most interesting thing about his observations is that staying in this unusual high vibration energy field allowed the small and inevitable road injuries to heal almost immediately. It was a really valuable experience, because under normal conditions it would be very difficult for them to follow the results of their work. Yeshua didn't even have to demonstrate his miracles of healing, because everything was so smooth and harmonious. The only thing that they could not prove during this long journey was the reaction of people to their stories about the spiritual side of life, about the divine laws, which would help them to reveal themselves, the life on this side of the world. It was difficult for them to do this while on the move, and at night everyone fell asleep instantly, exhausted from the long journey. Then came the long-awaited day, when they set foot in the land of Judea. First, Yeshua and Maria were reunited with their families, from whom they had received no news during the long months of their journey. Fortunately, they were all alive and well. They too were extremely happy to be back. Mary, Yeshua's mother, was the first to notice the invisible change that had taken place in her beloved children. He felt a certain mystery in the profound wisdom that emanated from his eyes. It seemed that they were returning from another world where there was no pain or suffering, only love and light. Yeshua only shared with his beloved mother what had happened to them during the long months of travel. She accepted with all her soul her great mission and her service for the good of the people, and promised to always be with Yeshua and Mary, and to become their first helper. The Second Coming of Christ, Part 22, The First Students. What happened with Yeshua and Mary could be called a transformation of reality. And so it happened. They settled in a small house on the outskirts of Jerusalem and began by surrounding that space with an impenetrable veil of light and love. This place became a small island of a different life, the life that was originally conceived by the Creator. It was interesting for Yeshua and Maria to observe how this world of high vibrations, created by them, could come into contact with the three-dimensional world. Amazing things soon began to happen. They began to attract exceptionally pure and brilliant people, who appeared in their lives casually as if they had come out of nowhere. Always hospitable and benevolent, Yeshua and Mary welcomed them warmly. With them they could speak of what they knew in themselves. They transmitted these divine truths to them, which had been revealed to them first by the Essence, then by God the Father and the inhabitants of Agartha. These people were ready to listen to them. It seemed that they had been waiting for them for a long time, so naturally this knowledge was absorbed into their hearts and souls. This is how, little by little, Yeshua gathered like-minded people and helpers around him. Later, some of them would be called apostles. Of course, these people did not appear around him by chance. They were also great souls who came to earth with the mission of awakening humanity. But only Yeshua was destined to become the unifying and connecting link in this community of great awakened souls. He was able to show in practice what a man can achieve when he recognizes himself as part of God. He showed his acceptance of the energies of God the Father in Agartha. This is how a series of miraculous healings began, and the glory of those healings has continued to this day. Yeshua knew the laws of the universe and understood that each soul goes through its own unique and very necessary experience. He asked God the Father and the higher powers to send him only those people for whom healing would become the next step in their spiritual growth. Those who were ready to use forever the miracle of healing that it would offer them and who would no longer fall into the world of duality. In other words, only those for whom this intervention would not become an obstacle, but would serve them for the development of their souls. Since no one else knew and understood that good works are not always done for the good of all, the higher powers listened to him. These people, whom he miraculously healed, were transformed not only physically, but also spiritually in the eyes of others. Yeshua's divine touch revived not only their bodies, but also their souls. These people could no longer live as they had before. They began to search for the higher meaning of their existence, while learning to listen to themselves. They began to search for their true purpose in life. They tried to help others in the same way that Yeshua had helped them, to free them from suffering, sadness and despair. Yeshua never asked for money for his miraculous cures, but his life and that of Mary passed in such a remarkable way that they never lacked for anything. People thanked them from the soul and with the sincerity of their hearts, whatever they did to make them feel comfortable. His sincere gratitude of the heart carried, expanded and attracted more and more people, with the energy of the highest vibrations, present in the space of love and light that reigned around Yeshua and Mary. But, unfortunately, on the other side of the border of the world created by them, the life of the three-dimensional society continued to boil with all its attributes. Yeshua understood that a gigantic job awaited him, but the foundations were already laid. We are the Absolute Father and the Mother of the Universe. We love you without measure. We have spoken to you through MAAMA. The dissemination and circulation of this message are highly recommended. The time has come to radiate on a large